But I'm not going to stand
but
for
brother,
personal
you got it
attacks.
wrong.
Say
You were
whatever you want.
preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just finish a
Don't call me
goddamn thought?
stupid.
So apparently there's this guy on the left. His name is Allan Lichtman, and he is an election predictor. He's a professor of something, and he predicts elections. He's gotten 9 out of the 10 previous ones correct, and he got this one way wrong. So let's get into it. But before that, let's talk about our buddies over at Orange Island Coffee. I'm a big fan of Orange Island Coffee. I've been drinking Orange Island for probably 5 or 6 years. I have a subscription. I get £2 per month, and I've had maybe 1 or 2 pounds of coffee ever in 6 years worth of drinking their coffee. That I was like, maybe I didn't like this one that much. But use discount code Guillotine and get 10% off your first order. So here's Allan Lichtman on CNN. Let's check it out.
He's been called the Nostradamus of elections. He's correctly predicted 9 of the last 10. That is, until the early hours of Wednesday morning, when CNN predicted Donald Trump would win the presidency. I'm talking about Professor Allan Lichtman. He says his 13 keys are how he makes his predictions for the White House. Here's the moment he realized his prediction was wrong.
I'm starting to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
She needs to make up 170,000 votes.
That's a lot of votes.
The big Democratic counties are mostly in.
No, yeah. Shit.
I just don't see it. Good thing I have nothing to do tomorrow.
Yeah, I took off work tomorrow.
And I'm not doing any interviews.
Good.
I'm done with that.
No, he's not.
So what happens to the keys now? Well, Professor Allan Lichtman is here with us tonight to tell us what he thinks went wrong. Professor, thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, we've talked many times. Were the keys wrong, or was your interpretation off this time?
Interpretation.
I think the fundamental problem was the keys, not my interpretation. No one's convinced me that was wrong. There are unique features. I've always said, some unique features could break the patterns of history, and I think that's happened here. First of all, a unique feature specific to this election. And you've heard me say this before. I was very critical of the Democrats for openly and viciously trashing their sitting president right out in public. I have never seen that before, and I've studied politics since the founding. And we saw Biden's approval rating plummet as they were doing that. I think that extended beyond Biden to weaken any Democratic candidates since they're discrediting their own administration. Secondly, it rendered problematic one of my keys, the contest key, since we couldn't have a primary, but the Democrats did unite around Harris, and I turned the key in their favor, but we had never seen anything like that before, and that was problematic. But more importantly, are trends that are long-term and affect the long-term future of our democracy, and the keys, because the keys depend upon a rational, pragmatic electorate deciding based on governance whether the incumbent party should get 4 more years.
Yeah, we do, and this guy just doesn't understand.
And we've seen the explosion of some trends that have existed before, but not to this extent. Disinformation. Elon Musk.
Disinformation, aka true information that they don't like.
I don't know how many hundreds of billions he has. He has been the director of misinformation. 2 billion views of his spreading of disinformation, not just about the economy, but about immigrants, about minorities. We've never seen disinformation at this scale.
Yeah, because he bought their disinformation machine, their actual disinformation machine, and now we get the truth, and now they're butthurt about it.
Next, we have never seen to this scale the agitation of 3 trends that have been very deeply embedded in American history: misogyny, racism, and xenophobia. The first anti-immigrant law was 1798, and Donald Trump wants to revive it. First it was the French, then the Germans, then the Jews, then the Mexicans, then the Muslims. There's always another. And of course, racism. We didn't even begin to dismantle Jim Crow until the 1960s, and it's still to some extent.
This is hilarious. They're attributing it to racism. Typical.
Survived. Women didn't vote until 1920. So that calls into question the whole premise behind the keys and behind our democracy.
Well, if it calls into question the premise of the keys, what about the fact that the pollster Nate Silver says that he used your keys to predict a Trump win?
Ha! Got him. That's what we're about to do.
You know, Nate Silver has been criticizing the keys since he attacked me for my correct prediction early of Obama's reelection in 2011. He has a vested interest in going against the keys because they put him out of business. And look what he did this year. This is typical Nate Silver. He says Harris is marginally ahead. So the election is going to be, you know, so close, 50-50. But
Wrong.
it could go either way, with the swing states going one way to one candidate or the other. And he says, my gut favors Trump, but don't listen to my gut. So no matter what happens, Nate Silver can't be wrong and he can't be right because his predictions are meaningless. I admit I was wrong because I go out on a limb and tell you who's going to win or who's going to lose, and I don't try to squirm out of it. And as we're having this discussion, I'm very squarely trying to consider why I went wrong, what it means for the future of our keys and the future of our democracy.
Given the fact that you talk about some of the disinformation, which seems to be the trajectory of a lot of things that's done with the democracy, do you intend, Professor Allan Lichtman, to change your keys or adjust to an additional, maybe a 14th one to adjust for that factor?
I don't intend to change my keys on the fly. That's a recipe for disaster, particularly when these critiques come post hoc. You know, it's very easy to say what you should do when you know the answer already. Much more difficult to do it in advance. And the keys go all the way back to 1860 in development and back to 1984 predictively. So I'm not going to very quickly change the keys based upon some critique that comes after they know what happened. But I'm very seriously going to reconsider. And I'm also wondering, are we going to have a free and fair election in 2028, which would render the keys irrelevant, but much more, threat.
But let's look at the keys. Number one, party mandate. After the midterm elections, the incumbent party holds more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives than the previous midterm elections. Nope, because the Republicans have more seats. No primary contest. Well, there was a primary contest, but they undemocratically put their puppet in there, and she lost big time. The incumbent seeking re-election. The incumbent party, the party candidate is the sitting president. Nope, she could have been, maybe. No third party. Yeah, well, they had a third party, but they didn't let him in, and he joined the other team. Strong short-term economy. Negative. Inflation's about to blow through the roof right here. We got, 20-something% inflation, the biggest it's ever been since, I don't know, what, the 80s, 70s, 80s, or something like that. Strong long-term economy? Nope. Major policy change. The incumbent administration affects major changes in national policy. Yeah, they do. I mean, I might give this one a green because it's technically true, but I think that the major changes are a big negative, and that's probably why they lost. So, they can get one. No social unrest. I'd say there probably is, because all like the protests and stuff like that on college campuses over the Israel Palestine thing. So I'll probably give that a no. No scandal. Untainted by major scandal. This one is like kind of maybe a hit or miss. I'm not sure where I would probably go with this one. Major scandal. I mean, well, actually, we got Afghanistan, which is, I guess that would be number 10. So this is definitely a no. Scandal. I mean, the border is probably a big scandal. There's no like personal scandal other than like, the buying the laptop and stuff, which has kind of been brushed under the rug. So I'd probably say no on this one too. Major foreign or military success. No, definitely not. From our perspective, charismatic incumbent. That's a big no. It's a big no. That was my Kamala impression. Uncharismatic challenger. That's a big no. So, by a very rookie analysis of his own keys, it says that if five or fewer keys are false, this indicates political stability in the incumbent party is predicted to win an election. So very easily we determined that they were for sure going to lose. But the expert, because he's got TDS and he's been drinking the Democrat Kool-Aid, he got this way wrong. So let's check him out on Piers Morgan, where he is going to get railed by some people in his own party.
I went on Fox News 10 days before with Brian Kilby and said, I think he's going to win big. But actually, most people thought we'd be incredibly tight and it could go either way and so on. But it wasn't that at all. Why do you think Trump is so difficult to poll? Which is clearly the conclusion I would draw from this.
Well, you know, I am forthrightly willing to admit I missed this election. I still think I actually had 10 out of 10 before. I think I was right about 2000, but we're not here to litigate that. I still think it's a pretty good record. Now, I think two things are operating here. Number one, I was incredibly critical at the time of the spineless, cowardly Democrats openly and viciously trashing their elected president and their elected nominee right out there in the open. I have never seen that before, and I've studied American politics since the founding, and that tainted any nominee. And they're now taking no responsibility for that. They're blaming everybody else. Until they look in the mirror, the Democratic Party is going to be in trouble. Secondly, why did my keys miss? Because my keys are based upon the proposition that a pragmatic, rational electorate decides whether or not the White House party is governed well enough to get 4 more years. That was exploded this time by a new wave of disinformation that we've never seen before. In addition to the usual sources of disinformation, we had a huge change this time. A 300 billionaire, a guy who's richer than most countries of the world, who controls X, spreading vast disinformation.
And now you guys don't.
According to
The CIA
reports,
doesn't
billions
anymore.
upon
FBI.
billions of viewers saw his disinformation. People have a completely distorted view of the economy.
What was the disinformation?
Thinking inflation is
Let me
going
pin
up.
you down on that, though. You say Elon Musk was spreading disinformation. Like what?
Yes, he is spreading vast disinformation that's sunk in. Even people who think their own financial situation is pretty good think inflation is going up when it's been cut by 75%, that unemployment
but it's still
is
inflation.
a near high when
It's still
it's
inflation,
near
Professor.
a low.
On that point, see, it's interesting. You would say that's disinformation, but the point is that inflation is still not zero. Therefore, prices are still going up. Therefore, people.
The only way you get inflation to zero is with a recession.
Yeah, but here's my point.
Obviously.
Here's my point. Yeah, but here's my
right
point.
about that,
Democrats kept telling
that's
the
not the point he
American
was
people
making.
rather arrogantly, I thought, the economy's in really good shape. Meanwhile, inflation still exists. In other words, prices have continued
High
to go up
inflation.
and up and up, albeit not at the same rate they were going up. But if it wasn't zero, and it wasn't, it was like 2.5% or whatever by the end, that is still inflation. So it's not
I think it's gotta be higher
disinformation
than
to
that.
say
The only
Americans
way
are
you
still
get it
suffering
to
inflation.
zero is a recession, is deflation. That's ridiculous. Inflation has been cut.
Yeah, it's not Pierce isn't making the right point here. The point is that because inflation was so high, prices are now way higher than they were, and they're still high. Even though they're not growing as fast, they're still very high, way higher than they were. So in people's minds, normal people's minds, prices are still high because of the previous administration. That's what he, I think, was trying to say.
Cut by 80%, but it's not just inflation that people are wrong about.
But do you accept
It's
inflation
every
means prices
aspect
are still
of the
going
economy.
up? Do you accept prices were still going up?
Of course.
Right, so
They
that's
always
the point.
do, unless
But
you have a
it's not
recession.
that's not disinformation.
That's ridiculous.
Is it?
High.
By Elon
Way
Musk,
higher.
And
that
it's
isn't
disinformation about every other aspect of the economy as well. Disinformation about undocumented immigrants, like they're the bloodthirsty killers. They are the
No.
most law-abiding segment of our society.
Yeah, they only take over and terrorize, like a few apartment complexes, and they only rape and kill like only a few American citizens here and there. They're not like criminals or nothing like that. There's no criminals getting in. Come on, they just want bread and stuff.
Numerous studies, including by the Libertarian Cato Institute, they commit crimes, including violent crimes, less than half of that of Native Americans, and they don't drain our economy. They
I think if you dig into those statistics, you'd find some interesting information there.
are the mainstay of the agricultural, construction, personal service, hospitality industries. Studies show you will drive the economy into a recession if you go through large-scale deportation of immigrants, and you will sweep it huge numbers of U.S. citizens because all the databases used to identify undocumented immigrants are fundamentally flawed. You can't have a pragmatic electorate under these conditions, and the mainstream media is utterly feeble. It spends 20 times more time on meaningless polls within the margin of error than it does telling truth to power and indicating the consequences of this election.
Okay, but it is okay. I'm going to come to
billionaires.
Okay, I'm going to come to Cenk. I mean, Cenk, you know, the biggest deporter in American presidential history was Barack Obama, who deported over 3 million people. This idea that Trump is going to become, you know, some outlier in terms of mass deportation. The great mass deporter was actually a Democrat president, Obama, by a long way, by the way. So this idea of like disinformation, I think some of it was disinformation, but it's, you know, I think the idea that this election was only won through right-wing disinformation, I'm afraid, I view that as a total delusion of the Democrats. Again,
delusional.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm sorry, but I totally disagree with Juan and Professor Lichtman. Don't blame the voters. I think, look, we could get into this discussion, but Juan, I think you're blaming the voters. I think that's a terrible idea. And look, I debated Professor Lichtman before. I told him his theories about the keys were absurd. I was right. He was wrong. I said he'd lose his keys.
No, you were
couldn't
not
find
right,
them before
and I
the
was
election.
not wrong, and that's a cheap shot, and I won't stand for it.
Well, who won, brother?
You should not be taking cheap shots at me.
Who won?
You want to make your
you
point,
live
make your
in
point.
a total
Don't make it
world
personal.
of denial.
I read your own followers' comments, and they all trashed you, every one of them. And
we talked about Cenk the other day. The fact that Trank Crazy TDS Cenk is calling this guy crazy is just hilarious.
Supported me.
Yeah,
so quiet with your personal attacks.
Come find out again.
Make whatever point you want. Don't make it personal.
Cenk said, "Catch me outside."
Know anything? You don't know anything.
You attacked me personally.
You're so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only been a professor for 51 years.
On this program,
appeal to authority.
I've never been able to finish a thought.
How many books have you published? No, because you're personally attacking me again. Say whatever you...
Man, this guy's ego is just crushed. He can just not take it, man. Look at this guy. He is just wet.
You want, but I'm not going to stand for
brother, you got it wrong.
Say
you were
whatever
preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just finish a goddamn thought ever on this show?
No, not if you're personally... I admitted I was wrong. I don't need you to call me stupid.
Okay.
Can I just say, it's great to see you Democrats all getting along so well.
Who taught you manners?
It's lovely to see a post-election harmony as you all come together again.
We're just one right now.
Hey, Allan, you deserve a tall glass of shut-up juice, so can you just shut up for a second and let someone who knows what they're doing
You're so right, Pierce. You're so right. We're so unified right now.
Okay. I will not sit here and stand for personal attacks, for blasphemy against me. You don't need to do that. You don't
blasphemy against you? Who the hell are you? Are you Jesus Christ, you loser? Okay, can I just give the correct answer for once? Okay, here we go. So, guys, you're blaming disinformation. There was disinformation. There was the cats and the dogs nonsense. The points you're making about undocumented immigrants, I agree with, Allan, okay? But that didn't cost the election. The main disinformation was about how the election was going to be rigged. And it wasn't rigged. It was dumb. They won easily. There was no need for that disinformation. You guys are missing the whole point. The people who are at fault are not other people. It is the candidate, Kamala Harris, the previous candidate, Joe Biden, Democratic Party, Democratic leadership. You guys don't want to admit that they're the problem. They're the cancer in the Democratic Party. So you blindly lash out at the voters, at information, at social media, and you want to shut down anyone who disagrees with you. That's not the correct answer. There are three wings of the Democratic Party. There's the establishment wing.
Before he gets into that, I just want to comment that Cenk is like usually right. He's a pretty pragmatic, like pretty, I don't want to say smart, but smart. He definitely understands politics well. And we talked about this the other day. He pretty much gets it right. He's pragmatic populist. He just is got the TDS and the Trump thing way wrong. But on everything else, he's pretty sharp.
that the great majority, almost everyone on television supports and kisses the ass of and does propaganda for. That wing has led to disaster. They lost to Donald Trump twice, nearly lost to him 3 times. And then the other wing is called the progressive wing, but those are 2 different sets of people.
They still might lose to him 3 times.
In the progressive, so-called progressive wing, what you have is the identitarian left, the people who do what the right wing would call woke politics and identity politics, and that is disastrous. That's what the trans ad was at the end, and it cost us. The most popular part of the Democratic Party is the populist left. That is the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. That part says, let's do super popular economic proposals like paid family leave, higher minimum wage, universal health care, public option. Let's do all of these things. And the establishment goes, no, our corporations don't want that. Our donors don't want that. So we'll just do identity politics. And maybe identity politics will unite the left. But it didn't. Identity politics led to disaster. It was a poison within the Democratic Party, used ironically by the establishment Democrats because they didn't want to talk about popular proposals that we have because their donors hate those proposals.
Okay, let me bring in Harry. Now, Harry, you tweeted or posted.
All right, icing on the cake. Found this video right here.
From the streets of Queens, New York, the 2-time leader and defender of the free world, the Teflon Don, Donald Chelsea, Elon, RFK, Benz, we squared up. Democrats played dirty, but we got the dub. It's been a long campaign, from Queens to Tampa Bay, but I praise God that he let me live to see this precious day. From Israel to Iran, and Russia to Ukraine, Joe made us a joke, they don't see us.
All right, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Respect on our name. The deep state run out of time, now they're terrified. They couldn't get a case of stick, but Lord knows that they